Have you ever felt it? That relentless, invisible hum of the modern world. It's not a sound that enters through the ears, it's a vibration that settles deep within the soul. It is the chorus of 1,000 notifications, each one a tiny, insistent tap on the shoulder. It is the echo of endless opinions, the 24-hour news cycle that trades in outrage, the curated perfection of social media that whispers, "You are not enough." We are living in the midst of a great storm of information, a cacophony of the soul where our attention is the most prized commodity, and it is being strip-mined from us, moment by fleeting moment. We race after life hacks, productivity tips, and 1,000 secrets to become more efficient, more elite, more something. But what if the upgrade we seek doesn't come from adding more? What if true power, true clarity, comes not from what we learn, but from what we are willing to let go of? According to the ancient Stoic philosophers, the path to wisdom, strength, and tranquility doesn't lie in the world outside. There is no magic button to hack your brain. If anything, there is only a path back, a return to the silent, unshakable fortress of the self. The Greek philosopher Epictetus, a man who was born a slave and rose to become one of the most revered teachers in the Roman Empire, once uttered a truth that cuts through 2 millennia of noise: men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. This is not mere philosophy. It is a diagnostic tool for the modern condition. The anxiety, the distraction, the feeling of being perpetually overwhelmed, these are not caused by the world itself, but by our untrained, reactive relationship to it. When you stop fighting yourself, when you stop reacting on instinct, when you stop rushing to keep up with the noise, that is when the mind, your mind, truly begins to work. Ironically, what makes you smarter, stronger, and more resilient isn't learning more. It's subtracting. Less stimulation. Less distraction. Less explanation. Less, but deeper. In the quiet space you create, your brain doesn't just go quiet. It recalibrates. It sharpens itself like a blade on a whetstone. You don't just become smarter in the academic sense, you become perceptive, discerning, and quietly formidable. You become unpredictable in a world that runs on predictable, emotional reactions. You become, in a strategic sense, dangerous. Because a person who is truly awake in a world of sleeping, reactive minds is always a threat to the status quo. This video is your invitation to step out of the storm. It is a guide to cultivating the most misunderstood and undervalued tool of power in the human arsenal, silence. We will journey through 12 profound benefits of this practice, not as abstract ideas, but as practical, actionable principles you can weave into the fabric of your life. If you are ready to turn inward, to forge a new kind of strength from the stillness within, then your journey begins now. 1. Silence is a sophisticated weapon of power. In the great theaters of power, from the political arena to the corporate boardroom, what is left unsaid is often more potent than what is spoken aloud. We are conditioned to associate power with noise, the rousing speech, the confident declaration, the booming voice that commands a room. But this is a superficial understanding of influence. True power, the kind that shapes outcomes and moves chess pieces while others are still staring at the board, operates in the quiet currents beneath the surface. Silence, in this context, is not an empty void, it is a finely sharpened, sophisticated weapon. The person who talks incessantly, who feels the need to fill every pause, is a person who reveals everything. Their words become a stream of data, exposing their desires, their insecurities, their strategy. They are an open book, and an open book is easily read and easily countered. The one who masters silence, however, becomes an enigma. They control the flow of information by restricting it. This creates a psychological vacuum, an unsettling ambiguity that forces the other party to scramble, to fill in the blanks with their own anxieties and assumptions. As the Stoics understood, this calculated pause is not avoidance or weakness, it is a deliberate act of strategic control. It is a soft attack that lands with devastating weight. Consider Napoleon Bonaparte, a master of both the battlefield and the psychological games of war. Before the legendary Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, a conflict that would redefine the map of Europe. Napoleon did not boast of his plans. He did not issue grand proclamations to rally his troops in public view. Instead, he wrapped his strategy in a thick cloak of silence. He went further, actively spreading false information, creating a fog of war that his enemies, the combined forces of the Austro-Russian coalition, were all too eager to interpret. They saw what they wanted to see, a French army that was weak, overextended, and ready to be crushed. Convinced of their superiority, they charged headfirst into the very trap Napoleon had silently laid for them. The resulting victory at Austerlitz is not merely a testament to brilliant military tactics, it was born from the deliberate, strategic control of information, a mastery of silence that turned his opponents' arrogance into their downfall. The Stoic philosophers, living in the equally treacherous world of Roman politics, understood this principle intimately. Epictetus's famous counsel, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak," was not a simple platitude about being polite. It was a core tenet of a survival strategy for life. To listen more is to gather intelligence, to understand the deeper motives and hidden weaknesses of those around you. To speak less is to protect your own position, to keep your intentions veiled, to remain unreadable. In the battleground of daily life, whether you are negotiating a salary, navigating a family conflict, or leading a team, this principle is your first line of defense and your most subtle form of offense. Silence, in this strategic sense, does more than just protect an advantage, it allows you to regain control over your most volatile asset, your emotions. When provoked, the instinct is to strike back with words. But in that heated, impulsive reaction, we lose our greatest strength, our reason. By choosing to remain silent, we give ourselves a crucial moment to observe our own internal state. We see the anger rising, we feel the sting of the insult, but we do not have to act on it. We can let the wave of emotion pass, and then respond with clarity and purpose, rather than being dragged under by the tide. The Stoics did not seek to dominate others through intimidation, but they relentlessly pursued the mastery of themselves. Silence is the first and most critical step on that path. In our current age of endless noise, where everyone is broadcasting their every thought, their every meal, their every fleeting opinion, the individual who knows how to be silent stands apart. They become a figure of quiet authority, a point of stillness in a frantic world. They are not easily pulled into the trivial games of distraction and outrage. They hold their ground, like a mountain in a storm, and without uttering a single word, they command a unique and powerful form of respect. Reflect on the past month. Can you identify one situation where you spoke too much or too soon? What information did you reveal? What was the outcome? Now, imagine that same scenario, but instead of speaking, you chose a deliberate, strategic silence. What might have changed? How would the balance of power have shifted? Write down your thoughts, not to judge yourself, but to learn the art of wielding silence. 2. The principle of eyes speak louder than hands. The human mind is a flawed and hasty interpreter. By instinct, we judge others based on what we can immediately see and hear. We don't pause to analyze, we rush to interpret. We don't seek to truly understand, we guess. We build entire narratives about people based on a few careless words, a nervous gesture, or a confident smile. And it is precisely this cognitive flaw that makes silence such a formidable tool. When you are silent, you rob others of the data they desperately need to form a judgment. When you refuse to speak, refuse to react, refuse to let your emotions play out on your face, you are not just withholding information. You are creating a strategic blind spot, a vacuum of meaning that others feel compelled to fill. And they will fill it, not with an objective assessment, but with projections of their own fears, their own assumptions, or their own hopes. This act of quiet resistance throws them off balance. They cannot formulate a counterargument because you have offered no argument. They cannot strike back because there is no clear target to strike. They cannot control the game because they don't even know your position on the board. Consider the tenure of Angela Merkel as the Chancellor of Germany, one of the most influential political figures of the modern era. For 16 years, she navigated a relentless series of European crises, from the Eurozone debt crisis to the migrant crisis. Her defining characteristic was not a fiery charisma or a talent for soaring rhetoric. It was her profound, often unsettling, silence. During the peak of these storms, while other leaders rushed to issue statements and make public pronouncements, Merkel would often retreat. She would say nothing, allowing the chaos of opinions to swirl around her. Her silence was often misinterpreted by the media as indecision or weakness. But it was the exact opposite. It was a period of intense observation and calculation. And then, when the negotiations reached their most critical point, when all other voices had exhausted themselves, she would speak. Her statements were rarely eloquent, often dry and technical, but they were delivered with the immense weight of careful consideration. At that moment, she was not just another voice in the room, she was the pivot upon which the entire alliance turned. Her power came not from speaking often, but from choosing the absolute right moment to break her silence. When she did, all eyes, all ears, turned to her. Her eyes had been watching all along, but it was her silence that made the world finally look up and listen. The Stoics understood this dynamic with perfect clarity. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, in his private journal Meditations, wrote to himself, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Let others be rash. Let them be impulsive. Let them be consumed by their own anger and spill their thoughts carelessly. You, the silent practitioner of Stoicism, maintain your depth. You maintain your composure. You maintain your upper hand." This is not merely a moral instruction on forgiveness, it is a profound strategic insight. It is the strategy of someone who recognizes that the greatest victory is often won by refusing to fight on the opponent's terms. When you pair this disciplined silence with keen observation, you become profoundly unpredictable. And unpredictability, in any strategic interaction, always breeds caution in your counterpart. They become more careful, less certain. Your hands may remain still, but your eyes, silent, sharp, and perceptive, do the unsettling work. In the next section, we will explore why this silent power is not a sign of weakness, but the coldest, most calculated form of strength a person can possess. The sooner you grasp this, the less you will be dragged into reactive battles, and the more you will begin to control the very landscape of the game itself. For the next 24 hours, enter every conversation with a new primary goal: to observe. Pay attention not just to the words being said, but to the nonverbal cues. The tone of voice. The flicker in an eye. The slight tensing of a shoulder. Say 20% less than you normally would. Your goal is not to be passive, but to be a silent collector of information. At the end of the day, write down what you notice that you otherwise would have missed. 3. Silence is not weakness, but calculating power. Every year, thousands of investors make a pilgrimage to Omaha, Nebraska, for the annual shareholders' meeting of Berkshire Hathaway. They come to hear wisdom from one of the most successful investors in history, Warren Buffett. But if you observe Buffett during the long hours of the Q&A session, you will not see a man who loves the sound of his own voice. There are no long-winded, eloquent speeches. Instead, you see a master of strategic silence. He sits quietly, listening intently to each question, observing the questioner, occasionally jotting down a note. A palpable pause hangs in the air before he offers a response. And when he finally speaks, often in simple, concise, and profoundly insightful sentences, the entire arena, filled with thousands of people, seems to hold its collective breath. Why? Because everyone in that room understands that every word has been meticulously weighed and considered. It is the silence before the answer that gives the answer its immense power. In our noisy, fast-paced world, this kind of stillness is often dangerously misunderstood. We mistake silence for timidity, for a lack of confidence, or for having nothing to say. But this is a novice's interpretation of power. In reality, silence, when chosen consciously and deliberately, is a form of calculated strength. The Stoics referred to this as cultivating one's inner citadel, a fortress of the mind that is not swayed by impulsive emotion or the external pressure to perform. When a person chooses to be silent, they are not being passive, they are actively engaging in a higher form of processing. They are analyzing the situation. They are reading the subtext of the conversation. They are listening not just to the words, but to the intentions and emotions hiding behind them. They are scanning for what is not being said. Because of this deep, silent work, when they finally choose to speak, their words land with the precision of an arrow hitting its mark. There is no need for excessive noise, no need for inflated volume. The power lies in the economy of the words, the clarity of the thought, and the perfect timing of the delivery. Remember, the Stoics saw self-control as the very foundation of wisdom. And speech, if not governed by reason, is a double-edged sword that can wound the speaker as often as the listener. Silence, in contrast, is both a defensive shield and a formidable weapon. Those who have mastered the art of when to stay silent avoid countless unforced errors. They do not make promises born from fleeting enthusiasm, they do not reveal secrets in a moment of emotional vulnerability, they do not walk straight into the verbal traps meticulously set by others. This principle applies not only in high-stakes negotiations but in every facet of life. The leader who talks too much often reveals their doubts and dilutes their authority. The parent who constantly lectures loses the weight of their words. The friend who over-explains their every action signals a deep-seated insecurity. In contrast, those who use their words sparingly, who let their actions and their quiet presence speak for them, build a different kind of influence. They leave others guessing. And in that state of uncertainty, you gain the upper hand. You become unpredictable. And as we have seen, unpredictability is a potent form of power. So if you have ever been underestimated because you are a person of few words, I want you to reframe that perception right now. Your silence is not a weakness to be overcome. It is a strength to be honed. It is a sign of a mind that is working, calculating, and waiting with precision. It is a quiet declaration that you do not need to fill the air with noise to prove your worth. Sometimes, a single, well-placed sentence, delivered at the perfect moment after a long, thoughtful pause, can shift the entire dynamic of a game. Learn to master your silence. Treat it as an art form. Practice it daily. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you are waiting for the right moment to say what truly matters. In your next 3 important conversations today, whether with a colleague, a client, or a family member, commit to practicing the 3-second pause. Before you respond to any question or statement, silently count to 3. Use this time not just to think about what you will say, but to observe your own internal state. Are you feeling defensive? Eager? Anxious? This small habit does 2 things. It prevents impulsive reactions and it communicates a sense of calm and thoughtfulness to the other person, instantly increasing your perceived authority. 4. Limit your words to avoid becoming your own trap. Restraining your speech is not a sign of social anxiety or weakness, it is the advanced strategy of an individual who understands a vital and often brutal truth: every word you speak is a stone you throw into the world. Once it leaves your hand, you have absolutely no control over where it will land, who it will hit, or what unforeseen consequences it will create. We live in a modern world where the speed of sharing has dangerously outpaced the speed of thinking. Talking too much, posting too often, and commenting too quickly has become a trap we eagerly set for ourselves. Every time we speak without careful consideration, we reveal more than we realize. We expose not just information, but our emotional state, our hidden vulnerabilities, and the weak spots in our armor. A single careless sentence, spoken in a moment of anger, arrogance, or exhaustion, can come back to haunt you, stabbing you in the back with the sharpest of blades, the loss of credibility and trust. In the political arena, a slip of the tongue can ignite a national scandal and end a career overnight. In the world of business, a moment of overconfident boasting to a journalist can become damning evidence in a future lawsuit. Think of the meteoric rise and spectacular fall of Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of the biotech company Theranos. Her power was built almost entirely on the compelling narrative she spun with her words. She spoke with unwavering confidence, making bold, revolutionary claims about blood testing technology that was, in reality, unfinished and unreliable. She repeated her faith in a future that was not yet real. And in the end, on the witness stand, it was her own words that became the rope that tied her down. Prosecutors played back her confident interviews, her grand pronouncements to investors, and her enthusiastic statements to the media. The very words that had once built her empire became the irrefutable evidence of her deception. She was not brought down by her competitors or her enemies, she was ultimately undone by the echoes of her own undisciplined voice. The Stoics understood that words must be measured with the same care and precision as a pharmacist measures a potent medicine. A little can heal, too much can be poison. Not everything we think needs to be spoken. Not every emotion deserves an audience. Sometimes, the wisest, strongest, and most strategic move is a deliberate and disciplined silence. This silence allows you to listen, to observe, and most importantly, to avoid weakening your own position with unnecessary self-revelation. Silence does not make you invisible. On the contrary, it gives you the space to show up selectively, sharply, and with genuine, undeniable power. If you believe in a higher power, in the wisdom of the divine, reflect on this. Even God, in most sacred texts, did not speak without pause. In the Bible, for instance, there are long moments of divine silence, sacred gaps in the narrative where humanity is meant to learn, to trust, to slow down, and to reflect. Not everything needs an immediate explanation. Some of life's most profound truths can only be understood through the quiet stillness of the soul. Here is the simple, powerful dynamic at play: when you speak too much, others know exactly who you are, what you want, and how to manipulate you. When you stay silent, they are forced to guess. And in the space of their guessing, you maintain your freedom and your power. Pause for a moment and ask yourself with brutal honesty, am I talking too much? In which areas of my life, at work, with family, on social media, do I feel a compulsion to speak, to explain, to defend myself? Is this speech serving my long-term goals, or is it merely serving my short-term ego? If you find that you are speaking more and achieving less, that is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that you are ready to begin mastering the strategic art of silence. 5. Silence creates information asymmetry. Have you ever wondered why the most powerful individuals in any room are often the ones who speak the least? They do not feel the need to boast about their accomplishments. They do not rush to explain their decisions. It is this very silence, this calculated absence of words, that makes them seem mysterious, unpredictable, and therefore, formidable. In the school of Stoic philosophy, this is not a coincidence, it is a direct application of high-level strategy. It is the practice of someone who understands a fundamental law of power: when you do not speak, you force others to guess. And in any strategic game, from a chess match to a corporate takeover, the one who is guessing is always at a disadvantage. Deliberate silence creates a powerful condition known as information asymmetry. This is a state where one party in an interaction possesses more or better information than the other. When you, as a matter of discipline, choose to withhold what you know, you are not being deceptive, you are gaining a strategic upper hand. The silent party maintains their advantage because they do not show their cards. They offer no emotional tells for their opponent to read, no careless words to analyze, no premature declarations to exploit. Meanwhile, the other side, starved of information, is forced to make their moves based on incomplete data, emotional projections, or raw fear. This imbalance is the fertile ground where superior strategy takes root and flourishes. A compelling modern example of this principle in action is the actor Keanu Reeves. He exists as an anomaly in the loud, oversharing world of Hollywood. In an industry where celebrities are incentivized to broadcast every detail of their personal lives on social media and in tell-all interviews, Keanu consistently chooses a radical path: silence. He offers no boasting about his successes, no clarifications on his charitable acts, and no reactions to the endless rumors that swirl around him. When reporters ask him deeply personal questions, he often responds with a near-meditative simplicity, a gentle deflection, or a quiet pause that says more than an elaborate answer ever could. What is the result of this? The public and the media are left to guess. what is he really thinking? What is his life truly like? What will his next move be? This very ambiguity has transformed him from a mere movie star into a figure of profound respect and fascination. While his peers often tarnish their own images with careless words or desperate bids for attention, Keanu has cultivated a powerful, almost otherworldly persona, built almost entirely on the foundation of strategic silence. Silence is not a sign of passivity, it is a conscious and strategic choice. The Stoics knew that the more you speak, the more you expose your weaknesses. You are essentially handing your opponent a detailed dossier that they can use to analyze your patterns, predict your reactions, and exploit your vulnerabilities. Silence, on the other hand, allows you to become the analyst. You are free to observe, to gather insights, and to maintain absolute control of the situation. You transform yourself into an enigma. And an enigma, in any battle, is far more terrifying than a predictable, loud-mouthed opponent. When you learn to be comfortable in your own silence, you are not just preserving your inner peace and tranquility. You are taking command of the information game. And in a world where everyone is desperate to be heard, the one who has mastered the art of when to be silent is the one who ultimately makes everyone else listen with an intensity and respect they never expected. For the next 7 days, put yourself on a strict, information diet. This means making a conscious choice to speak less and listen more in every interaction. Your goal is to gather information, not to dispense it. In meetings, aim to be the last one to speak. In conversations with friends, ask more questions and offer fewer opinions. At the end of each day, journal about the new insights you gained simply by shifting the ratio of listening to speaking. You will be astonished at how much the world reveals to you when you stop telling it what you already know. 6. The first mover disadvantage. In the theater of human interaction, there exists a deeply ingrained and flawed instinct, the urge to be first. The person who speaks first, who offers the first solution, who makes the first move, often believes they are taking the lead, seizing control of the narrative. But in the cold calculus of strategy, moving first is often a profound disadvantage. You are not leading, you are exposing. When you speak first, you lay your cards on the table for all to see. You are forced to express your stance, reveal your emotional investment, and declare a position. This act locks you into your own words. You have now created a fixed point against which others can maneuver. If you wish to change your mind later, you must pay a price, a loss of credibility, trust, or influence. You have, in essence, volunteered to be the stationary target. The one who masters the discipline of waiting, however, the one who stays silent, remains unbound. They are fluid, adaptable, and free. They gain precious time to observe the first move, to analyze its strengths and weaknesses, and to formulate a response with calculation and precision. They can adapt their entire strategy based on the information the first mover has so willingly provided. In this light, strategic silence becomes a hidden and devastating form of power. It is the wisdom of the chessboard master who understands that sometimes the most powerful move is to let your opponent reveal their flawed opening. Zeno of Citium, the founding father of Stoicism, once gave a piece of advice that is as much a strategic manual as it is a moral guideline: better to trip with the foot than with the tongue. A physical stumble may cause temporary embarrassment or a minor injury, but a verbal stumble, a slip of the tongue, can shatter opportunities, demolish a reputation, and destroy relationships built over years. This ancient wisdom reminds us that in many of life's most crucial situations, speaking too soon is not just unwise, it is an act of unintentional self-sabotage. Let us bring this into a modern context that many of us have faced: the job interview. Imagine you are asked a challenging question, such as, "What is your greatest weakness?" The candidate who reacts impulsively, who rushes to fill the silence, often stumbles. They might offer a cliched and dishonest answer like, "I'm a perfectionist," which signals a lack of self-awareness. Or, in their haste, they might reveal a genuine weakness that raises a serious red flag for the employer. Now, consider the candidate who has trained in the art of silence. Upon hearing the question, they do not panic. They pause. They take a thoughtful breath. They might even nod slightly, signaling that they are giving the question the serious consideration it deserves. In that 5-second pause, they are not just thinking, they are communicating immense confidence, composure, and depth. When they finally answer, their response is measured, honest, and strategic, perhaps framing a past weakness as a challenge they have actively worked to overcome, thus turning a potential negative into a story of growth and resilience. In the high-stakes worlds of political negotiation and corporate deal-making, this principle operates on a grand scale. The diplomat who speaks first reveals their country's opening position, giving the other side a clear anchor point to negotiate against. The CEO who blurts out their company's desperation for a deal loses all leverage. In these moments, silence is no longer a passive state, it is a tactical maneuver. It is power held in reserve. We are already halfway through this deep exploration of Stoic silence. If you are still with us on this journey, I want to pause and offer my respect. It shows that you are not merely a passive listener, you are a seeker, a reflector, someone willing to do the hard, quiet work of looking inward. That is a rare and admirable quality in our distracted world. But do not leave this forge just yet. The next pieces of this philosophy will take us even deeper. We have seen how silence acts as a shield. Now, we will discover how it can become a tool, a probe used to uncover truth and a foundation upon which to build unshakable authority. This is the point where silence ceases to be about what you withhold and starts to be about the powerful effects you create. Stay with me until the end, and perhaps consider dropping a comment that says, "I choose silence not because I am weak, but because I am listening." Together, let us discover why the one who stays silent is often the one who is truly in control of the game. 7. Silence is a tool for probing and building authority. In the stark, windowless interrogation rooms of the FBI, a powerful psychological tactic is often deployed, one that requires no force, no threats, and no raised voices. It is the strategic and patient use of silence. After asking a critical question, a skilled investigator does not rush to speak again. They do not prod. They do not attempt to fill the uncomfortable space with more words. They simply wait. And in that heavy, expectant silence, a predictable human drama unfolds. The person being questioned, unable to bear the weight of the unspoken tension, begins to talk. They talk not because they want to, but because the human mind abhors a vacuum. They talk to ease their own anxiety. And as they talk, things that should have remained hidden begin to slip out. Their carefully constructed defenses start to erode. The truth, or at least a crack in their facade, emerges from the depths. This is not just a clever psychological trick, it is a profound demonstration of quiet strength, an application of a principle that Stoic philosophy has long held as central to wisdom. When you remain silent, you are not being ruled by your ego's need to prove a point or your anxiety's urge to resolve tension. Instead, you gain a subtle but decisive upper hand. You compel others to act while you remain still, observing, gathering information. Silence grants you the right to truly listen, not the superficial listening we usually engage in, where we are simply waiting for our turn to speak, but a deep, active listening that seeks to understand the person in front of us. In interviews, in negotiations, and even in intimate conversations, a well-placed pause is an invitation. It beckons the other person to reveal what they originally intended to keep hidden. This practice also sets you apart. In a world of frantic, anxious talkers, the person who is comfortable with silence radiates a rare and compelling aura. They appear calm, thoughtful, unrushed, and deeply confident. And from that perception, genuine credibility is born. People begin to trust you more, not because of what you say, but because of the evident mastery you have over yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have." At first glance, this might not seem to be about silence. But it strikes at the very heart of the matter. The person who feels compelled to dominate every conversation, to jump in with an answer, to endlessly explain themselves, is a person driven by a desperate need to control external factors, what others think of them, how they are perceived, whether they are seen as intelligent. They are valuing things outside their control. In contrast, the person who chooses strategic silence understands that true power is not about controlling others, it is about mastering oneself. They are focused on the one thing they can control, their own response. And in their quiet, self-possessed presence, respect begins to form organically. It is not demanded, it is earned. You are heard not because you spoke well, but because you demonstrated that you do not need to speak to be heard. Silence, when used at the right moment, is a sharp, precise probing tool. It gently forces the world to reveal its hidden truths before you make your move. At the same time, it lays the foundation for a persona of composure, alertness, and trustworthiness, the very qualities that build real, lasting authority. In a world drowning in noise and argument, the individual who can stand firm in their silence holds the balance of power. In your next conversation where you feel a disagreement arising, try this experiment. State your position calmly and concisely, in a single sentence if possible. Then, stop talking. Do not elaborate. Do not justify. Simply fall silent and hold eye contact. Watch what happens. The other person, faced with your simple, unadorned statement and your expectant silence, will feel an overwhelming need to respond, often revealing the true source of their objection or the weak points in their own argument. You have used silence as a probe to draw out the information you need, without engaging in a fruitless debate. 8. In negotiations, silence forces the other party to reveal their cards. In the high-stakes arena of a negotiation, the person who speaks less often holds more power. Silence, which may appear to be a sign of deference or uncertainty, is in fact one of the most sophisticated and effective strategies one can employ. The ancient Stoics knew that direct action is not always the path to control. Sometimes, a patient, calculated silence is the very key that unlocks the situation and allows you to master it. A negotiation is not a game of eloquent words, it is a battle of wills and a war of information. The side that possesses more information almost always holds the definitive advantage. Imagine a simple, everyday scenario: you want to buy a used car. After inspecting the vehicle, you make your opening offer. The seller, instead of immediately countering or accepting, does something unnerving. They say nothing. They simply look at you, their expression unreadable, and let the silence stretch. In those few, brief seconds, the entire dynamic shifts. The tension in the air becomes thick and heavy. You begin to second-guess yourself. Was my offer too low? Did I offend them? Your mind starts racing, scrambling to fill the void. You feel a powerful urge to justify your offer, to explain your reasoning, and then, you do the one thing you shouldn't: you blurt out a higher number, just to break the silence. At that exact moment, the negotiation is essentially over. You have shown your hand. You have revealed your limit. And you have lost the advantage you once held, all because you could not endure a few moments of quiet. This very drama plays out every day at every level of human interaction, from children negotiating a later bedtime with their parents to CEOs hammering out the details of a multi-billion-dollar merger. When a talented job candidate states their expected salary, a savvy hiring manager might simply nod slowly and remain silent. In that pause, the candidate's confidence can begin to waver. Was I asking for too much? Are they about to reject me? Out of sheer anxiety, they may preemptively revise their proposal downwards or offer to concede on other benefits, all to fill a void that was strategically created for that very purpose. Once again, silence wins. The Stoics did not advocate for using silence as a tool for dishonest manipulation. Rather, they used it as a tool for achieving clarity, for observing reality without the distortion of their own emotional needs, and for choosing the most rational moment to act. As Epictetus taught, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. We are born to be observers first and speakers second, because our words can easily betray us, but our silence never will. When you choose to stay silent in a negotiation, you are not just refusing to be controlled by your own anxiety, you are actively prompting the other side to reveal their strategy. You are giving them the rope with which they may hang their own argument. They may reveal their own deadlines, their own points of pain, or their own eagerness to close the deal. All of this is vital intelligence that you would never have gained if you had been the one doing all the talking. So, the next time you walk into any situation that requires negotiation, whether it's for a car, a house, a salary, or simply a disagreement over plans, I want you to hold this principle in your mind. Do not fear the silence. Become comfortable in it. Let the other person be the one who feels the desperate need to break it. Because in that silence, you stand to lose nothing. But they, in their haste to fill it, might just lose everything. Think about an upcoming negotiation in your life. What is your primary objective? What is your ideal outcome, and what is your absolute walkaway point? Now, instead of planning your opening lines, plan your moments of silence. At what key points in the conversation, after they state their position, after you make an offer, will you deliberately pause? Visualize yourself holding that silence, calmly and confidently. This act of mental rehearsal will train you to use silence not as a void, but as your most powerful negotiating tool. 9. Silence conveys more authority than words. Amid the constant clatter of our modern existence, the ceaseless ping of notifications, the shouting matches on social media, the endless meetings filled with circular arguments, silence, when it finally appears, has a stunning and powerful effect. It cuts through the noise like a beam of light in a dusty room. The Stoics understood this phenomenon well. They knew that the person who talks the most is not necessarily the one in control of the conversation. In fact, true authority often belongs to the one who speaks the least, but whose few words, when finally spoken, carry the weight of careful thought and profound stillness. Silence, when it is used intentionally, radiates a quality that is hard to define but impossible to ignore: presence. It is not just the restraint of speech, it is a quiet, powerful declaration of depth, confidence, and self-mastery. When someone enters a room and, instead of immediately trying to command attention with a loud greeting or a barrage of words, they simply stand there for a moment, silently observing, their calm demeanor and steady gaze command attention more effectively than any speech could. That is the beginning of authority. Steve Jobs was a master of this art. During his legendary product launch keynotes, he did not just talk about technology, he created a dramatic experience. He would walk onto the stage and often pause, letting the silence in the massive auditorium hang in the air for a palpable moment. He made people wait. He built anticipation not with hype, but with its absence. And then, when he finally spoke, dropping a single, sharp, perfectly crafted sentence like, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone," the impact was explosive. His silence had primed the audience. It had created a space of reverence. His silence said more than any lengthy paragraph ever could. Let us return to the wisdom of Epictetus: we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. We have explored this as a call to listen more, but it is also a profound call to verbal restraint for the sake of authority. Words, once spoken, are fragile things. They can be twisted, misquoted, taken out of context, and used against you. Silence, on the other hand, is inviolable. It remains intact. It cannot be distorted, and that is precisely why it is more trustworthy and, ultimately, more authoritative. Beyond the realm of business and leadership, this principle extends into the spiritual domain. In many of the world's great wisdom traditions, silence is considered the highest form of communication with the divine. When prayer transcends mere words and becomes a state of quiet, contemplative presence, that is when a human being enters into a sacred connection where language is no longer necessary. A person of deep faith does not need to shout their beliefs from the rooftops. Their faith shows itself most clearly in the way they live, quietly, but with an unshakable conviction in their values. The silence of their faith is a wordless declaration: I do not need to argue, because I know where I stand. This is why the Stoics did not view silence as a retreat from the world. They saw it as a strategy, as a form of leverage, as a quiet but powerful statement of intent. It is a declaration that says, I am in control of myself, and no one gets to force my reaction simply because they are uncomfortable with the quiet. In that disciplined silence, there is dignity. There is self-mastery. And there is a kind of authority that 1,000 shouting words can never hope to achieve. Silence is not a void. It is a powerful exclamation mark that never needs to shout. Over the next week, I challenge you to practice the art of the silent entrance. The next time you walk into a meeting, a social gathering, or even just your own home at the end of the day, resist the urge to immediately start talking. Instead, take 3 seconds to simply arrive. Be silent. Observe the room. Let your presence register before your voice does. Notice how this small shift changes the way people respond to you. Notice how it centers you, instantly placing you in a position of calm authority. 10. The discipline and patience of strategic silence. In any form of communication, from a casual conversation to a high-stakes debate, the human instinct is to be quick. We want to speak as quickly as possible, to argue back instantly, to offer a justification immediately, to wrap things up fast. But in this rush to react, we become profoundly vulnerable. The faster we react, the less we think. And once we have spoken too soon, or said too much, we have often handed control of the situation to the other side, sometimes before the game has even truly begun. The Stoics were not afraid of silence, they embraced it. They trained themselves to endure the discomfort of the pause, to sit still with a question before offering an answer, because they understood a fundamental truth: the quiet is where wise decisions are born. Practicing this kind of verbal discipline is not a sign of weakness, it is a demonstration of intentional composure. It requires immense inner strength, the kind of strength needed to resist the ego's powerful urge to react emotionally or to always have the last word. Think of Abraham Lincoln, one of the most revered presidents in American history. He was a man known for his profound eloquence, but he was also a master of strategic silence. He famously wrote letters in moments of great anger or frustration, pouring all of his rage and disappointment onto the page. And then, he would fold the letter, put it aside, and never send it. This practice is a perfect embodiment of Stoic discipline. Lincoln understood that venting his emotions would bring him a moment of satisfaction but would likely cause long-term damage to his relationships and his political objectives. His silence was not an accident, it was a calculated and disciplined choice. He is also credited with the saying, "Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and to remove all doubt." Lincoln did not just speak less, he knew precisely when to speak and, just as importantly, when to stop. His silence was a strategic asset, not a personal quirk. I want you to stop and think about that feeling, that urgent, pressing need to respond right now. It is a powerful illusion. See every moment of silence not as a void, but as a strategic moment where you are withholding clues, where you are refusing to fall into the emotional trap set by others or by your own undisciplined mind. So, the next time you feel that powerful urge to speak just to fill a gap in the conversation, I want you to stop. That is the moment of training. That is the test of your discipline. Imagine you are being heavily and unfairly criticized in a team meeting. All eyes are on you. Someone has just said something that stings, and your entire nervous system is screaming at you to push back, to defend your honor instantly. But then, you do nothing. You offer no explanation. You show no emotional reaction. You simply sit in a calm, observant silence. The entire room, which was expecting a confrontation, is now thrown off balance. They do not know what you are thinking. They cannot predict your next move. And in that ambiguity, that silent space you have created, you have begun to regain the upper hand. But how can this silence be both a defensive shield and an offensive weapon at the same time? Stay with me for the next section, as we explore the potent dual power of silence, a sharp mental weapon that the Stoics swore by. 11. Silence is both an attack and a defense. Is the person who remains silent in a conflict truly at a disadvantage? Or could they, in fact, be the one holding all the cards? In the schools of Stoic philosophy and in the playbooks of modern strategic thinking, silence is far from a passive retreat. It is simultaneously a solid, impenetrable shield and a sharp, piercing spear. First, let's consider silence as a defense. When we choose a deliberate silence, we are protecting ourselves in one of the most intelligent ways possible. We are refusing to reveal our position. We are refusing to open the door for judgment, for criticism, or for exploitation. In any argument or confrontation, the animal instinct is to fight back, to explain our actions, to justify our decisions, to prove ourselves right. But a practitioner of Stoicism knows that every word we speak is a door we open, and not every door should be opened. By remaining silent, we refuse to provide our opponent with more ammunition. We control the narrative by refusing to participate in theirs. Silence allows us to lower the emotional temperature of the situation, to maintain our own internal calm, and to retain full control of our faculties. But do not mistake this defensive posture for surrender. In many situations, silence is the most effective and devastating form of attack. When we do not respond as expected, the other side begins to unravel. They are forced to guess our intentions. They cannot read our emotional state. And this profound uncertainty builds a quiet, intense pressure. In the world of business, in high-stakes negotiations, or even in personal relationships, this strategic ambiguity can lead your opponent into making critical missteps, because the human mind fears what it cannot understand. A classic corporate example of this is the strategy employed by Apple in the years leading up to the launch of the first iPhone. The tech world was buzzing with rumors. Competitors like Nokia, BlackBerry, and Microsoft knew that Apple was working on something revolutionary, but they did not know what. Apple maintained a near-total, disciplined silence. There were no press leaks, no "coming soon" announcements, no tweets from executives. This wall of silence created a massive information vacuum. Rivals were left to speculate, and they speculated incorrectly, assuming Apple was developing a more advanced version of the iPod. This strategic ambiguity kept them from reacting in time. They continued to invest in physical keyboards and incremental software updates, completely unprepared for the paradigm shift that was coming. When Steve Jobs finally walked onto that stage in 2007, his presentation was not just a product launch, it was a preemptive strike. Apple's silence had not just protected their secret, it had created the element of surprise, allowing them to seize the entire future of the mobile industry with perfect, devastating timing. The Stoic understands that true power does not come from saying more or speaking faster. It comes from saying the right thing, at the right time, after a period of deep and silent thought. Silence is a strategic weapon, both protective of your own position and piercing to your opponents. And once you learn to wield it with skill and discipline, you are no longer playing by someone else's rules. You are creating your own game. 12. The psychological effects of silence. We have established that silence is a strategic tool, but to truly master it, we must understand why it works so effectively. The power of silence lies in its profound psychological effects on the person who is subjected to it. This is not just a clever tactic, it is a subtle, strategic, and incredibly powerful form of influence. In any conversation, it has been observed that the first person to break a significant silence is often the one who relinquishes control. This does not necessarily stem from inherent weakness, but from a deep-seated human discomfort with ambiguity. Silence forces us to turn inward, to confront our own thoughts and insecurities. And in that raw, unfiltered stillness, the human mind begins to operate in a very predictable way. When you are confronted with someone who says nothing in response to your statement or question, your mind immediately begins to generate narratives to explain the void. You ask yourself, did I say something wrong? Are they angry with me? Are they silently judging me? This internal questioning creates uncertainty and anxiety. And in that unsettled state, we become prone to talking more than we should. We rush to clarify, to apologize, to justify, essentially, to do anything to fill the gap and resolve the tension. In doing so, we often reveal vulnerabilities, express emotions, or expose opinions we never intended to share. The Stoics understood this psychological mechanism with remarkable depth. Silence is a form of influence that requires no overt action. It compels the other person to react, to interpret, and often, to define you through the lens of their own imagination. And strangely enough, in most cases, they do not assume you are clueless or shallow. The narrative they create is often one of admiration or intimidation. They assume you are wise, composed, and thoughtful, all because you had the discipline to choose the right moment to stay silent. What they fail to realize is that your silence is not a reflection of who you are, it is a mirror reflecting what is going on inside their own minds. Let us return to a specific example, the job interview. The interviewer asks a final question, "Is there anything else you would like to add?" and then falls completely silent, looking at you with a neutral, expectant expression. Many candidates cannot bear this pressure. The silence feels like a judgment. They feel a desperate need to say something more, to impress the interviewer one last time. They often keep talking, rambling far more than is necessary, and in doing so, they may reveal a lack of direction, an unnecessary detail that raises a new question, or simply a lack of confidence. Meanwhile, the candidate who understands the power of a pause will meet that silence with their own calm. They might smile, and after a moment, say with quiet confidence, "I believe what I've shared accurately captures who I am and what I can offer this team. I have no further questions at this time." And then, they too go silent. They have not just answered the question, they have passed the unspoken test of composure. In this sense, silence is not merely a shield, it is a mental lever. You do not need to say a lot to leave a lasting impression. Sometimes, the calculated absence of words creates the most powerful impact of all. You create an empty space, and you allow others to fill it with their own expectations, their own anxieties, or their own admiration. Silence does not make you invisible. On the contrary, it makes you impossible to ignore. Conclusion. Silence is not an absence. It is a presence. It is a strategy, a power, and an art. We have journeyed together through 12 compelling facets of this forgotten strength, exploring how it sharpens our focus, how it protects us from our own impulsive words, and how it grants us a profound and unshakable authority. We have seen that in the chaotic, noisy arena of modern life, the person who talks the most is merely revealing their hand. It is the one who has mastered the discipline of silence who truly controls the pace and the outcome of the game. The path of the Stoic is not an easy one. It asks you to go against your deepest instincts, the instinct to react, to defend your ego, to fill every empty space with noise. But in return for this discipline, it offers the greatest prize of all, freedom. Freedom from the judgment of others. Freedom from the tyranny of your own reactive emotions. Freedom to live a life of purpose, clarity, and deep, inner peace. In a world that is screaming to be heard, the one who knows when not to speak is the one who is truly listened to. Your journey into the heart of this power is just beginning. What you have learned here is not a collection of theories, it is a toolkit for forging your own inner citadel, a fortress of the mind that can withstand any storm. Now, I ask you to pause one last time. Reflect on what you have heard. What aspect of silence resonated most deeply with you? Was it the idea of silence as a weapon of power, a tool for negotiation, or a path to inner tranquility? When was the last time you were intentionally silent, and what did you discover in that quiet space? Your story and your insights matter. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us build a community of modern Stoics, of warriors of the mind who are learning together to navigate this world with grace and strength. Your comment might be the very thing that inspires someone else to begin their own journey. If you found value in this exploration, show your support by liking this video. It signals to others that this is a conversation worth having. And if you are ready to continue your training, to delve deeper into the timeless wisdom of Stoicism and learn how to build a life of resilience and purpose, then subscribe to BAudio and hit the notification bell.